Hi, I'm Nicole Kemper. I'm a writer, actor, and filmmaker living in Atlanta, Georgia. This is 50 Foot Woman, and I've committed to shooting one roll, at least one roll, of Super 8 film per month. Okay, so today we're going to be color grading the 500T, so the footage that I shot for what I'm calling challenge number 2, and that is to shoot interiors. I've already watched the raw footage, so you can go back and watch that video if you want. I've got all the footage there in its entirety. It's just me and my friend and collaborator Sarah shooting some super silly footage with Sarah where she's dressed like a cat. It's very fun. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with that footage yet. I have some ideas, but in the meantime, let's get this stuff color graded. So with that, I thought that maybe I could take a moment to talk briefly about some of the things that I feel like are important to understand when you're color grading. So if you're new to color grading, and by no means is this a comprehensive tutorial on how to use Davinci or even the concept of color grading, but I've just decided with these videos where I'm color grading the footage, maybe I'll sprinkle in a couple of concepts. So I am an editor and colorist. I use Davinci Resolve for my color grading. Of course, I've also used Premiere before for some things where there isn't the time or budget to take it into Davinci. I've done a little bit of color grading in Final Cut, Avid, Media Composer. So I've done color grading in a lot of different tools. Davinci is sort of my preferred tool, but certainly I think any of these concepts or ideas, you can apply those to basically any program that has a color grading tool. So a couple of things that are really important to think about when you're color grading, whether you're color grading digital or on analog, which, you know, to be honest, what I'm color grading was shot in analog, it was shot on film, but it was scanned to digital. So the files that I'm working with are digital files that are scans of that film. The files that I'm color grading today are in log color space, meaning that they don't really have any color or exposure settings kind of baked into them. It's really just kind of this flat color space, which is ideal for color grading because it gives you just gives you a lot more to work with. So things that you should be thinking about when you're color grading, I think just to start off with, if you're looking for something beyond like, I want to adjust the brightness and contrast, those are like sort of the basics. Or if you're like, I want to make my images more saturated, these are all really basic concepts. But if you want to get into like the color grading, the concept, the three things that you really need to be thinking about are hue, saturation, and luminance. And hue is simply what is the color? What color on what part of the color wheel are we on? Are we looking at blue? Are we looking at teal? Are we looking at purple? Are we looking at sort of the orange, yellow, red sort of end of the color wheel? Where are we on the color wheel? That's your hue. Saturation is how vibrant or how much of the color is there. Are we looking at an incredibly bright and vibrant red? Are we looking at a more muted red? So that's your saturation. And the luminance is, I think you can most simply boil that down to exposure. What are the brightest parts of the image? What are the darkest parts of the image? And then sort of the middle tones are all sort of the rest. So we think about that as highlights, which are the true white part of the image, shadows, which are the true black part of the image, and then midtones is kind of everything else in between. And so those are the things that we're thinking about when we are color grading. That's sort of a real simplistic version of it, but those are sort of those are some really foundational concepts. And I just thought I'd talk a little bit about that before I get into what we're doing today. As far as in what order should we do things, usually you want to tackle the luminance or the exposure first. So we're going to deal with the exposure and correcting or adjusting the exposure of the image first, and then hue and saturation, because often hue or in a saturation are affected by adjusting the luminance values. So when you adjust the exposure, you might find, oh, this image leans a little bit into the reds or leans a little bit into the greens. And so then you might want to adjust the hue to something that is more neutral or something like better. If you're like, well, this is a really warm image, but I want it to be cooler in temperature, so I'm going to push it a little bit more towards the blue. And then of course, saturation, how much color is there. Usually I do that last. So I'm usually doing luminance first, or exposure, then hue, whether that's correcting a problem or pushing it more towards a certain part of the color wheel, and then saturation is last. Okay, so let's get right into color grading this crazy cat footage. All right, here we go. I have already I've already split up the clips. I've actually already exported an XML out of Premiere and then brought it into Davinci, which is a process that I think I went over in another video. So I'm not really going to go over this right now, but so I'm already up in Davinci, and I've split up each of the clips because, of course, when you're working with footage that came back, some film footage that's been scanned, it comes as one long clip, and you really can't color grade the whole clip all the same because we're moving the camera around, we might be adjusting the lights, and so one general color grade isn't really the best. So you really want to break up each clip and treat them individually. So let's just start with, I think I'm just going to start right here at the beginning. I'm not going to crop anything. That's something that I'll do in Premiere. So I like to get on a frame that looks pretty good, representative of the whole thing. And I'm not going to get into like an extensive tutorial in Davinci, but I will say that Davinci works in nodes, which is similar to layers in Photoshop, I guess you could say, where you can just kind of successively add grades on top of grades or parallel to other grades. I have been asked, you know, how I like to work with those nodes in Davinci. So those of you guys that do work in Davinci and are curious, you know, what's my process there? I like to do a different node for each thing that I'm doing. That way I can always go back and tweak them individually. So right now I've created a node for exposure. And so I'm just going to get in here and adjust the exposure of this image. Of course, we want to sort of make these shadows a bit darker, make the highlights a little bit brighter, and then we'll kind of deal with the midtones after that. Okay, so you may have noticed that there's an extra piece of software here on my desk, and that is the tangent ripple. It's just got, it's just basically sort of an external controller that I can use to adjust the exposure and work with the color wheel. And you don't have to have this. You can certainly use your keyboard, but if you can afford to get one of these things eventually, if you're doing a lot of color grading. If you're not doing a lot of color grading, don't spend the money, but it does make things a bit easier, and you can adjust things a little bit more incrementally, get a little bit more just a little bit more control over what you're doing than you can with the mouse. So in Davinci, we've got gain, gamma, and lift. And so gain is going to be your highlights, lift is going to be your shadows, and gamma is going to be the midtones. So I'm adjusting the gain first. I'm not really going to get into scopes today, but I do use the scopes here. Maybe that's something that we can get to in another video. But for now, I'll just say that I am looking at those as I'm adjusting my image. So this is pretty bright and fun. So I think we want to keep it bright and fun. We don't want to make it too moody. So I'm not going to make those midtones too dark because you know, we're not doing a film noir. We're doing a silly cat video, so I am going to keep it pretty light. And once I feel like I'm pretty happy with exposure, of course we can sort of turn that on and off to kind of see where we started and how far we've come. And so I'm just going to keep moving. I might come back to this exposure and continue to adjust this, but for now we'll just keep going. I'm probably going to go ahead and adjust the contrast while we're here. And contrast is something that is related to adjusting the exposure. And so with contrast, we're looking at how far apart are the highlights and the shadows. It kind of stretches those apart. So I don't want to make it too contrasty because again, we're not trying to make it moody, but it is adding a little bit of definition and detail here. Maybe you can hear my children yelling. You know, it's Friday. There's big emotions. I can see in the scopes that we've got a lot of red in there. I don't know that that is a color cast so much as we're seeing a lot of red like already in the set. But if I were to pearl back on the red, for example, we can see not too much because we don't want to make it cold. I do like that kind of warm, fun look. And label your nodes, folks. And then we'll just add one for saturation. And this is a fun, sort of a fun, like goofy, silly, fun video. So I'm gonna add a bit of saturation here. Ooh, not quite that much. Ooh. And now that we've done that, maybe we want to pull a little bit out of the midtones because she's getting a little pink. And for that, maybe we'll just pull her face. Just a little color there. A little bit of that saturation. Maybe just pull a little bit of the red out. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's nice. It really helps to turn it on and off to see what you've done. Yeah, because we want all the fun color in the background, but we don't want the person to look too unnaturally red. But I think that's looking pretty good, and maybe we want to watch it up to speed. So as we're doing this, we are seeing a little bit of that noise from the 500T come out, but that's to be expected. Sorry, grain, I should say grain. Noise is really more of like a video thing, but the grain you're seeing a little, because 500T is a high-speed film, is higher, it has a lot more grain. And as we're doing the color correction, we're bringing things out and we're seeing a little bit more detail in the image. Naturally, we're gonna see more of the grain. So that's a little insight into my process for color grading this 500T Super 8 footage. And so now I'm gonna show you some comparisons between some of the original raw footage and the color graded version. Thanks for watching. This has been 50 Foot Woman. My channel is Critical Crop Top Films, and you can find all of the 50 Foot Woman videos in the 50 Foot Woman playlist. And if you like this video, maybe subscribe, and I'll give you a new video every Wednesday. I also have a blog on Substack. It's called The 50 Foot Woman as well. If you subscribe to that blog on Substack, you get the videos, but also some of my still photography and photo walks and things like that. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can find the link to my blog on Substack below. Next up, we'll be moving on to another challenge. So tune in next week to find out what that's going to be. And in the meantime, let's shoot more film, you guys.